What is the United Nations? United Nations is an international organization that was founded after the conclusion of the Second World War. And like any other organization, it has a website, emblem, flag, membership and its own rules. But what is it, and what significance does it have on the world? The United Nations is a successor of the League of Nations. The League of Nations came into existence in 1919, at the end of the First World War, and has a primary purpose of world peace, and by the outcome of the Second World War, it was quite necessary for the League of Nations to be removed. Therefore, United Nations was formed in 1945 to prevent a Third World War and take the place of its predecessor by promoting world peace through facilitating international law, international security, economic development, social progress, human rights, civil rights and liberties, political freedoms and democracy. When United Nations was first formed in 1945, it only had 51 member states, but now it has 193 states with the intentional exclusions of Kosovo. Even though Kosovo declared independence from Serbia in 2008, it didn't get full recognition from the UN. Taiwan, as Republic of China, mainland China, took place of Taiwan, also known as Republic of China, in the United Nations. And the Vatican City. As it's not a democracy but has a ruling monarchy, the UN doesn't agree, and therefore makes the Vatican City not part of the UN. Before you know much more, you need to understand the organs of the United Nations. There are 6 principal organs established by the Charter of the United Nations, each of it with its own head. 1. The UN General Assembly, which decides the admissions of new members, adopts the budget, and also elects the UN Secretary General. 2. UN Secretariat, which is the administrative organ of the United Nations. 3. International Court of Justice, which is the universal court for international law. 4. UN Security Council, for international security. 5. UN Economic and Social Council, for global economic and social affairs. 6. UN Trusteeship Council, for administrating trust territories. So who elects Secretary General? Well, as I said above, the United Nations Charter allows the General Assembly to appoint the Secretary General upon the recommendation of the Security Council, who can veto the decision if they think the choice is unfit to be the General. And this process goes on and on until it passes both the General Assembly and the Security Council. So what does the UN do to ensure world peace? Well, if there's an unrest in a country, UN, which doesn't have an army of its own, so it sends the armies of its members under the banner of the UN, and their own banner. The armies of these nations are generally controlled by their own nations, but there's the General for the United Nations, currently Ban Ki-moon from South Korea. But does the General of the United Nations have any power over the countries? Can the UN be called the global police force? The United Nations is an assembly of the world's nations, in which the nations who joined the UN had to promise to respect and allow all the decisions that the UN makes. If there's a decision that is supposed to be made by the United Nations, then the Secretary General of the UN, UNSG, who also acts as the de facto spokesperson, speaks to the nations about the decisions they made, but the actual implementation of the decision is made by the nation. So no, UN does not act as a global police force, as it does not have the direct right to implement the laws. To sum up, United Nations is an international organization that has 193 member states, with the intentional exclusion of Taiwan, Vatican City and Kosovo. Inside the United Nations there are 6 organs: UN Secretariat, International Court of Justice, UN Security Council, UN Economic and Social Council, UN Trusteeship and UN General Assembly, which is responsible to elect the Secretary General upon the approval of the UN Security Council. And the Secretary General makes a decision on the economic, political and social issues, and the nations should implement them.